This is a great opportunity for us to try on some of what we talked about, which is this is a study session. There's no expectation or we can't make any decisions, but we get to ask a lot of questions. And then you as a board will get to determine next steps from there. So with that, Chris, welcome to our school district.
Thank you. Glad to be here and happy to be a guinea pig for questions for the board. My name is Chris Ryder. I'm an attorney at Rohrback. We're a firm based here in Seattle. Myself, I'm Washington born and raised, went to Washington State and Gonzaga Law School. I clerked at the state Supreme Court and then have been working for Rohrback ever since. Our firm does a lot of consumer side and government institution kind of plaintiff-based litigation. So we have a lot of experience working with government bodies in the opioids litigation, in a lot of environmental health-related cases. And then in the school district context, really cut our teeth in the rule litigation. So we represented a few dozen school districts, mostly along the West Coast, including Juul and its parent company Altria over the Juul e-vaping tobacco product, which recently is settled favorably on behalf of the school districts. Kind of on the heels of that, we started getting contacted by some of our school district clients saying, hey, we have a real problem with cell phones, with social media in our classrooms. It's really kind of changed how we operate, what our day-to-day looks like. Is there anything we can do? And so working with Seattle Public Schools, we filed the first kind of mass tort case against these social media companies. When I say that, I'm referring to kind of 4 for 5 platforms. So it's Meta, both Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and then Google specifically for YouTube. And this is kind of on the heels of parents and families also bringing their own individual cases on behalf of their kids. And so the litigation is really focused on negative mental health impacts that these platforms have on kids. And so there's been a growing body of social science that's indicated that extended use or compulsive usage has a host of negative mental health impacts on young people in particular. So things like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, body dysmorphia. So, the Surgeon General and other public health bodies have released some kind of additional warnings over the past couple of years indicating, the growing body of literature is supporting a link between social media use on the one hand and negative mental health outcomes on the other. And, where this kind of comes to play with school districts is, school districts have to meet kids where they're at. Kind of crazy. There's some studies we've cited in our complaint. School districts are actually the #1 mental health provider for school-age children, actually outpacing private medical care. And we know schools bear a large burden. A lot of school districts all across the country of different sizes are spending a lot more resources and time on addressing kids' mental health. So we look at counseling, third-party providers, and another really big piece of this litigation is time diversion. Just, what teachers are doing in the classroom has shifted. What administrators are doing has shifted. And there's dollars and cents we can put on that. And so we're at a point now, I think, Fred mentioned, this is a mass tort case. It's a little bit different than a class action. So in a class action, we kind of have 1 or 2 plaintiffs that stand in for kind of a larger body that's been impacted in the same way. This is a little different. So while there are a lot of individuals and a lot of school districts that have sued, you can't really benefit if you're not a direct participant. So to date, there are kind of 2 large actions. I'll refer to them in acronyms. There's in federal court, we call a multi-district litigation, just a fancy word for saying all these cases have been lumped before one court. That's in the Northern District of California. And then we have a kind of parallel state court proceeding in California State Court. That's called the JCCP. In large part, these are working in tandem. There's a few differences I can kind of touch on if you might have questions about. But between the 2, there are over 1,300 school districts that have filed suit. It's a similar number just for individuals and their parents that have also sued for personal injuries. A lot of those, again, are related to anxiety, depression, eating disorders. Unfortunately, there are some suicide-related cases as well.
So you mentioned the California state court actions. Yeah. Are those then confined to California school districts? And is there any parallel in other states? I mean, I understand the federal is being consolidated in the 9th district, but the state level, Is that sort of sui generis right now, or is there any others?
That's a great question. This is a little unusual. So usually you see these cases kind of just in federal court. Usually if the parties are from different states, companies will kind of call removing to a federal court, and then they can kind of ship them all to the same district. Since the tech companies are all based in California, they're all at home and have consented jurisdiction there. Really any school district can sue there. So we do have school districts from, I can pull the numbers, I think it's 30 odd states that are actually suing in state court. And there's a similar number in federal court as well. So there kind of is options in terms of venue. Right now, our firm is recommending districts that have not filed pursue action in the federal action in the MDL. And the reason for that is a little odd. We've gotten different rulings between the two different judges specific to the school district cases. So Judge Gonzalez-Rogers in the federal action has given us the thumbs up. She's denied the defendant's motion to dismiss for both the school district's public nuisance and negligence claims. So those are moving forward. We're taking active discovery. A limited number, we call these bellwether districts, have been selected. So there's a dozen school districts that are kind of being worked up. They're going through full-blown discovery. If Mercer Island were to engage in this action, you would not be doing that if you're not a bellwether. There's a couple of initial steps that I'll talk about, but it's much less burdensome. Again, we kind of want the game of efficiencies. So we want parties to be able to file, but not have to go through all this work. Realistically, we're not going to take 1,200 cases to trial. So given those rulings for the state court, those unfortunately were the kind of motion to dismiss was upheld. We're appealing that. We've engaged with appellate counsel. I should say too, there's a lot of firms that are involved. Yeah.
For that, was that primarily on section 230 like defenses?
Wait, I want to hear the whole thing.
Yeah. I'll try to weave that in. So in the state court, and it's a little unique here, in federal court, the parties agreed all the school districts are kind of combining their complaint. We're going to have a master complaint that stands in for all school districts, and that was upheld. So anyone who's filed in federal court is moving forward. In state court, it's a little odd. We did kind of bellwether briefing districts. So we selected 4 states and picked one district from within that state and just said, based on their complaint they filed, legally is it sufficient to move forward? The court said no. 230 has been a big part of this. So section 230 essentially bars internet service providers, tech companies, social media platforms, like the defendants here. They can't be held liable for what other parties are posting. So kind of a classic example, if student A is posting really nasty things on student B's wall, we can't hold Meta or Snapchat or TikTok directly liable for that. So a lot of this litigation is really looking at how these platforms are designed and how they're designed specifically to hook kids in, to drive that compulsive and problematic use. So we're not really looking at, kind of what is the content. There's some flavors of that, and there's some kind of failure to warn claims that we can kind of claw a little bit of that back into the case. But even in the federal action, the claims have been upheld. There's small little pieces that have been whittled off because of section 230, but there is a case withstanding beyond that point. So that was not the basis for those cases being dismissed in state court.
And then I guess in federal, the idea is that the algorithm is a perspective or action that the internet providers can be held
Right.
liable.
So kind of the design, any kind of underlying design mechanisms that the actual, the companies are putting into their platform, that's their conduct. And they argued in their motions, it's an algorithm, but it's still tied to content. The court said, well, if that's the case, kind of everything you do is tied to content and you can't be held liable for anything. That was dismissed, that was denied. So as long as we're looking at kind of the company's conduct, what they're doing in designing their algorithms, how they push out notifications, warnings to parents, there's a list of conduct we can face liability on.
What's the benefit of both state and federal?
It's only, so you'd only file in one. So it's kind of a choice between going federal or state. Again, this is really unique in these type of cases. We often are just in federal court because usually the defendants are from all over the country and the plaintiffs are from all over the country. So this is pretty unique that you have that. It's a little bit reading the tea leaves, to be candid. I don't know if it ultimately will matter in the sense that we think if there's any informal resolution, so a settlement, We don't imagine there's going to be a lot of import on where you filed. I mean, this is going to be a global resolution regardless of, we think at this stage, regardless of where you filed. There could be some valuation, again, based on, if school district cases are not essentially kind of revived in state court, they can change how they value certain cases. But there's no kind of inherent, there's just kind of some strategic things on the back end we can kind of talk about where it makes sense to file. And again, based on the rulings that exist to date, we do think that federal action is the better place to be just because those cases are actively moving forward. Bellwether districts for trial have been selected. So again, the kind of buy-in for any district now, the kind of charge to enter is pretty low. So again, there's a master complaint that's already in place that kind of stands in for everybody. There's then a short form complaint that kind of says, we as a district have experienced these same harms. We're going to allege these same claims, kind of relying on the master complaint, which is very lengthy, very thorough. A lot of firms have worked on that. And then you submit some extra demographic information in what we call a plaintiff fact sheet. That's what we used initially to kind of pick the bellwethers. So the court, defendants, plaintiffs all said, who's actually represented? We have districts from, 40 odd states, this size, this economic background, who actually makes sense, who kind of stands in for everybody. And that selection's been made. So at this point, that purpose is kind of moot, but it's still a process we have to go through. Again, it's a pretty limited number of questions. We'll collect some documents, but kind of compared to a normal case where you're active in discovery and people being deposed, there's a lesser burden. And after that, it really is kind of waiting to see what happens with the bellwether district. So as those prep for trial, those outcomes will kind of inform what everyone else is going to do and what the value of these cases is.
If you see these going up, we're kind of trying something new. This is that someone has something that they want to say. So
Yeah,
you start seeing
yeah.
these going up.
Who are the bellwethers, particularly like just in our neck of the woods? So we have an understanding.
I can get a list. I don't have all of that on the top of my head. I can say in federal court, there are no districts in Washington. Vancouver, which is one of Roback's clients, is a bellwether in the state court proceedings. So we're appealing on their behalf right now. It's a very slow appellate process in California state court. So unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to have a ruling on that this year. I certainly hope so, but that's kind of a long drawn out process. But there certainly are other Washington districts. I think we're more than happy to provide certainly local and perhaps even a full listing of people who filed to date. That's something I think we can get you guys.
One of my questions that I've heard from board members, other board members, and that is, we have similar districts to Mercer Island in different parts of the country, and certainly down in Silicon Valley and that area, there are some. And we have community members who, work for different companies. And, I'm sure that if there was a mass action lawsuit against the automobile industry and you were running a school district in Detroit, there might be wonderings about what does it mean to be part of it. And have you talked to other districts, not Mercer Island, but others who are grappling with whether or not to join? And why are some districts choosing maybe not to join? As you're meeting with our colleagues?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a few names I won't disclose just because they haven't filed yet, but I will say I think we will have some other local area districts filing soon. I can say public record, like Washington has recently filed. I think they're going to be somewhat similar. As a kind of Silicon Valley, we also represent Palo Alto Unified. I mean, certainly that was a big point in conversations, kind of right in their backyard. I will loosely say, again, there's also some employees with relationships to very high up people in those companies. So that was a consideration. I think to kind of cut to it, I think a lot of school districts, right? You guys are not litigious bodies, certainly not as plaintiffs. I mean, school districts aren't usually in the business of suing people. I think it really speaks to kind of the impact that you as a district and that your students are having. And I think that's really why we've seen, in conversations with our clients, that really is the driving force. It's kind of making a statement to kind of say, hey, we know what's going on. We want to protect our kids. We want to be involved in that process. I think that's a really big factor. For Palo Alto, I can say, that was a thing that was kind of commonly talked about. And in terms kind of globally, in terms of pros and cons, again, I think the barrier to entry is pretty low at this point, especially in federal court. Again, that's not to say there's no burden, there's no downside. It's not to say we couldn't open another bellwether pool and maybe you're in the mix again. You know, I can't promise that won't happen. But again, I think just kind of where the posture is at, it's pretty easy to join. And again, kind of a lower hurdle. You know, cons, there's some staff time. And certainly, you know, Keller Rohrbach, we work with a lot of government institutions, school districts. We try to be really great partners in minimizing that burden. I mean, even the plaintiff fact sheet I mentioned, you know, there's a lot of negotiations and kind of bringing down the number of questions, the number of documents, because we know 1,300 school districts, you know, don't need to be spending all this time giving you all this information that is ultimately not going to be looked at.
So what is the staff time for the worksheet? And then second question was, do the bellwether districts have any say over whether or not they're a bellwether district?
Yeah, so I'll take that in two parts. So after the first part, kind of selection, I mean, a district can't be, you know, unilaterally kind of foisted into be a bellwether. I mean, school districts always retain the option to dismiss their case. Obviously, that's going to impact whether or not you can recover anything. Usually that's kind of with prejudice. You're not going to be able to rejoin, but that is an option. And that's something we've seen happen with a couple of districts, and then as well with some of the individuals in the personal injury cases have also done that. And again, right, that's for a variety of reasons, right? You know, there's certainly some burdens, you know, being deposed, turning over documents, right? There's some weight to that. We acknowledge that. So there is always an option, you know, if, for instance, Mercer Island decided to join, for whatever reason, we open another kind of round of picking bellwethers, you're selected, you would have an option to at that point.
So the only option at that point would be to either be a bellwether or to dismiss.
Yes, but that was if you were selected. So again, there's always going to be a large pool, you know, certainly as your council, we also have kind of leadership roles in both venues. That's another thing. 1,200 school districts, not all school district councils are involved as heavily. There's kind of court appointed leadership positions, committees that are kind of doing the active litigation. We're in both camps, both federal court and state court, especially with the school district cases. We're very actively litigating. So, you know, we do have some say in kind of whose names are thrown out there. You know, in federal court, both sides were essentially given half the picks, and they said, you know, plaintiffs' lawyers, give us your best 5 cases. Defense lawyers, you know, they're probably taking not as friendly cases for us. In state court, it was a little more random, but again, I think since we're at this point, we would advise filing in federal court. The plaintiffs' counsel have a lot of say who's actually being kind of nominated in that process.
Yeah, I guess to piggyback off of Fred's comment.
The number of hours of staff time.
Oh yeah, sorry. And then the number of hours, you know, the short form complaint is a kind of a ministerial process. I mean, there's a few things we can put in for the district, and that's really easy to file. That then sets off a 90-day timeline for the plaintiff fact sheet. Usually in our practice, what we do is we kind of, you know, we talk with the board, superintendent, help identify a few administrators who would likely be actually gathering some of the information and documents, sit down with them for 40 minutes to an hour to kind of just walk through and upfront kind of figure out where we're looking and what some of this information is, just so they're not kind of going out and wasting time spinning their wheels. I think most people spend a few hours. So, you know, collectively, when we look at everybody, you know, maybe it's a dozen, maybe it's 20, but I think the average person is not spending more than a handful of hours, or certainly not in kind of an initial search. Again, we like to be good partners. We know all of you have better things to be doing.
So
You
10
have,
to 20 district hours.
yes.
Yeah, I guess to piggyback off of Fred's comment, you know, if you were in Detroit and, you know, school district, you know, what would your position be? I mean, it's two-sided, right? Like on one hand, if you have a school district in Dearborn, when Ralph Nader comes out at unsafe at any speed, they're saying, yeah, like we work in the industry, we recognize that these protections and guardrails like should be in place and it's valuable. And so therefore, understanding that we will not be a legally, representative of the group, but I think there's certain districts that symbolically are very representative, and those would be Palo Alto, Mercer Island. I mean, there's a handful of districts that certainly in the press are symbolic bellwethers among us. And then that's a hard conversation, right? I mean, I think people in our community are best positioned to see the dangers of some of these, newer and emergent technologies. because they have community members that work for those companies. And it's trying to decide if our goal is to give voice to those concerns or not. And I think that's a complicated decision, but we would definitely, in my view, be symbolically quite important if we were to join this litigation.
And I just add one comment on that. I mean, I'd say, in general, we've kind of found this to be a bipartisan issue. I'd say just in terms of size of districts, location of some of our clients, there's certainly kind of folks of both stripes all over the political spectrum. Again, we've seen that not to really be a dividing line in any of this. I think too, I'd add it's kind of a third track in this litigation too. There's school districts, personal injury cases. A lot of state attorneys general are also suing specifically Meta and TikTok. Again, these are broad bipartisan coalitions. About 40 states are active in this litigation as well. So again, I don't think in my personal practice that's something I've seen be a big hangup. I certainly understand, that's a concern for the board. I'm happy to provide more information on that. But they too, for our clients, press has not been a big thing. When Seattle first filed, that was a little splashy just due to the nature they were the first school district. Other than that, we've had a few clients get, an immediate inquiry. We're of course more than happy to partner. We're also happy if school districts, want to handle media themselves. But other than that, I don't think we've seen our clients kind of have big backlash or tackling a lot of media coverage.
I think we kind of just building on that, I would like to say that, all initiatives would be as well supported as the cell phone initiative when we, move to ban those. And when you said kind of bipartisan, for us, it was, that we had a large, we had groundswell of support, and it came from all over, I think, the island that would support that. It was a collective thing on that. And, to the degree that which that influences this, that's up to you as a board. But just a reminder that that was a wildly supported thing of you and the board. And
I would actually, I think another thing a lot of boards ask about is kind of what's the outcome? What are we looking for? And I think there's kind of two large pockets to that. One is certainly monetary. We're hoping to get districts a lot more resources for mental health support. And that's kind of both looking backwards, kind of in expenditures that have already happened. And then with the public nuisance claim, you kind of have abatement. So it's also looking at, there's a youth mental health crisis. And if a jury agrees that these companies have been a substantial factor in that, we can also kind of get extra resources looking forward. So that was something that happened in the Juul litigation. There was a lot of programming, counseling that came with that. So it wasn't just kind of cutting checks to districts. There's actual meaningful kind of resources that come with that. That's certainly an avenue we're trying to keep on the table and push in this case. And then the second kind of related to that too is, legally it's injunctive relief, but we're really asking these companies to change some of the practices with the platforms. We're not asking social media to go away. It's not bad, wall to wall across the board. We're going to be bringing in a lot of expert witnesses talking about what we think are kind of reasonable changes that can be made. Medical experts, psychologists talking about the impact this has on kids, on young people. And again, kind of with these companies specifically, we'd like to think there are kind of some small tweaks that they can make where, they're still going to exist, they can be profitable, but they know some of their actions are harming kids and they're not changing that. That's what we kind of like to say is the focus of this lawsuit. And I think that's why a lot of districts are getting involved too. Dan, do you have another?
No, I was going to ask about the abatement and sort of the injunctive relief. Because I think for a lot of parents, I mean, that is the lens that they view it through. That sometimes when you have settlement amounts that are financial, it just disappears and it doesn't result necessarily in any change in behavior. And really, the question and the focus from my perspective is more the protective, forward-looking, injunctive type relief to make, online less toxic, less harmful.
Yeah. And again, fortunately, we have lots of expert witnesses. So, Chris Ryder's not making the definitive list of what these changes need to be. We have a lot of great public health partners that are also involved in these cases that will kind of help tell a court, tell a jury, you know, what are those changes that need to be made.
What are the reasons, just that you hear that districts choose not to participate?
One can be staffing. I mean, I'd say especially for some smaller districts we've spoken to, bandwidth is just really hard. Even if it is only those, you know, 20 hours up front, it can sometimes just be too much for a bad time of year. We have had a couple of districts also concerned about kind of the optics, and, you know, I think specifically there's been a couple of districts that kind of had a couple tumultuous years politically, and certainly some kind of change in their board makeup and their superintendent. It just felt this was maybe a little too bold for them, kind of at that moment in time. But again, I mean, I'd say the districts we've talked to or engaged with, I mean, the overwhelming majority have decided to go forward. Oftentimes, it's a question of kind of timing, because that can certainly influence things. But I mean, personally, I've not had a lot of districts that I've actually had contact with decline.
Is there any possible financial impact on districts other than the 10 to 20 staff hours?
It's a little hard to say at this point. I haven't seen it. So, you know, another concern we've had with some districts is, you know, we have Chromebooks or we have certain partnerships with Google, or, you know, we use some of their products, you know, could they take that away from us? It's a valid concern. It's not one that we've seen come to fruition yet. You know, it's kind of the one that's been raised that we've addressed. But again, we haven't seen any negative outcomes on that front. You know, I'm also happy again to provide kind of a list of our clients that we've filed on behalf of, so to the extent, you know, useful for the board, Fred, you know, to talk to kind of other partners who are already engaged in this litigation. We're also happy to provide that to you guys.
Yeah, I know this is a study session, there's no voting. I mean, like, but from my perspective, you know, since part of this is to have like sort of where people are coming from. You know, I think we probably should go forward like federal. I mean, I certainly want to know like who those bellwethers are, just, you know, for due diligence and to understand that. You know, I do think there's like symbolic weight, particularly when a district like ours sort of recognizes the toxic effects of social media and believes that there are ways it can be addressed that benefits students. So yeah, I mean, that's just sort of my thinking. You know, given where many, you know, some people in our community work, you know, it's something that, you know, I realize, I'm not sure it's contentious, but, you know, like there can be perhaps a little bit of just tension with that. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
One more logistic question, then I think you as a board having your conversation is great, especially with Chris here. Timeline, I know that, you know, we've asked you that and you've said, hey, the sooner the better. And so I'm sure that is an answer, but that will help should the board decide to move forward. I think that will help me to better understand then that 10 to 20 hours, where does it fit within the scope? So one more logistic thing there, and then
I'll take that in kind of three different stripes of three flavors. So I mean, on one hand, there's no real immediate hard deadline for joining this type of case, especially, you know, trials haven't started. As you can imagine, the defendants don't really want to talk about settlement at this point. They're trying to make these cases go away. There's no real kind of hard, you know, legal cutoff at this point. Of course, we do often tell our clients, the sooner the better. In part, that's just kind of preserving your damages. You know, when in time you file informs kind of how far back we can look for statute of limitations for those kind of past damages. I mean, the abatement and that injunctive piece is always going to be there no matter when you file. So that is kind of forward-looking. So that's one piece that we think informs it. And then the third piece, and this is one I usually talk about since I'm working with our clients and doing the fact sheet, is just when do people have time? You know, again, when you file a complaint, you have those 90 days to work on that fact sheet. You know, no one's knocking it out the first week, right? There's plenty of other things going on. I mean, the nice thing is I've never had a problem with our clients getting it done in 90 days. That's a sufficient window. It's just kind of, you know, one of the folks, the boots on the ground actually doing this, when do they have bandwidth? You know, certainly I don't think filing in June would be helpful in trying to corral people over the summer to work on a fact sheet. That's difficult. Fortunately, I'm only going to do that once or twice. So I think there's some benefit about, if we're able to start working on that, kind of finish that part before the school year, that's helpful. Early on, if we also kind of know who might be working on that, we can kind of maybe push that out a little farther or re-engage in the fall. I'll say, I've been working on this case for over 2 years. I've had some districts I spoke to last spring with great conversations. We engaged with them formally, had a complaint teed up and ready to go, and they decided to wait until the beginning of the next school year so they'd have people back in place, kind of ready to go to work on the fact sheet. So that's another consideration. I think, our firm would be open to kind of having those discussions about what makes sense for the district, because again, we know it does take staff time. Again, we want to be a partner in that, but there's an element that's kind of what's most convenient for the district in terms of getting it done. Thanks.
Other questions from board members, or do people want to share how they're feeling about it?
I'm going to say that I agree with everything that you have said, and appreciate that. I think I'm feeling the same, probably as them.
Yeah.
Not only as, I don't think that there's a possibility that there's an impact on how the future will look of social media and every single kid in the future. And I think that that's for me biggest incentive, because I think that the communities, we see the difference. Like when they went to blackouts, kids were out in the streets playing because there was not even internet in their phones. So it makes a difference. And you can see it. And even with the ban of the TikTok, that they're joking, actually you could see people getting into their own living rooms, even complaining with their parents, but it is just that detachment of, and you can see that it is the addiction is real. And it has real mental health impact in kids. So absolutely agree with all of it. And I wish that the ones that are kindergarten and younger will not have to deal with the same pattern. Yeah, that it will look different. I think that is my wish. Exactly, my wish.
Jody and Deborah?
I'm deferring to the sense of the board in this. I don't have a strong opinion either way, so I'm just gonna flow on this one. I mean, I supported, I have from the beginning, and I mean this in like a learning, and I think it's also gonna answer some questions if the community has any. When this first came up a couple years ago, I was the only board director that wanted to learn more. And I'm wondering, like, can you just talk me through your change in because I just want to learn about what the concerns were and how they've been addressed.
And I'll answer your question too after Dan, because I also have gone through kind of an evolution on it. So go ahead.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, so for me first, it was that we need to take action in our own district and have a cell phone policy. And now that we've taken that action and seen the dividends, now I think it's appropriate to start sort of looking upstream. But otherwise, I see that as not being fully accountable and not taking actions within our own power first. So yeah, so for me, it's the adoption of the cell phone policy.
That makes a ton of sense. So for me, I think it was very abstract. Honestly, it sounded sort of spurious, sort of like, and so I think having you here today and finally getting to hear more, I think we've gotten updates from Erin over the years, like, but really like kind of like hearing the sort of like meat and potatoes of what it is very helpful to me. But I also think since then I've seen the success of some of the mass action mass lawsuits against the Jewel company. Like I've seen that that's a real thing, honestly, and that like, then it has changed corporate behavior. And I also think that right now we have a better understanding of how social media impacts kids' lives and our own lives, that just like kind of we continue to refine from year to year. And I agree that having taken the step ourselves of banning cell phones in our schools, and like for me personally, like seeing the really positive effects on my kid who was pretty much addicted to her phone from like, 4th grade onward, that her not being able to have access to her phone in school, she has joined activities, she has made more friends, so like she is so much more involved in real life now that she can't just like be on her phone during lunchtime, you know, so like I haven't just.
Can you quit saying those things because he's gonna want you to like,
Maybe the bell number.
Those are selected as well.
no, thank you guys.
Yeah,
I appreciate
yeah,
it.
but it's
helps.
like, yeah, so that's why like over the years I've kind of been like, it sounds too good to
So
be
you were a
true,
wait
you know?
and see.
I was a wait and see, and now I have, so I believe, yeah, so I
Perfect.
support.
And I will say that I was not part of that board then, but I will say that for me also, a clear understanding of the financial impact of the district also makes.
Yes,
Very much so.
helpful.
Because it would have better on my decision on how to move forward.
You know me.
Wishes there, the change of the corporate.
And-
And I hate to interrupt, but just, I think it's important too, and I think since Darren and Fred, I mean, Keller Rohrback, we're taking these cases on a contingent fee basis. So I mean, districts are not paying anything up front. This is successful. You know, we'll take a portion of that, you know, recoup costs, but otherwise, I mean, there's no upfront cost to the district in filing.
You know me, I'm a true north, so.
Yeah, 100%. I was also gonna say though that I have a lot of friends that are in like upper management at some of these companies, and we had a lot of conversations about the effect on teenagers and on younger kids. And I don't feel like any of them would take it personally if our district were to do this, you know, like everybody understands that something's gotta change. And it's just the same way as like, you know, tobacco companies didn't want to label their products. And in fact, our labels in this country still aren't very good compared to the labels in other countries where it's like, you know, cancerous lungs, and it's like, you will look like this if you smoke this pack of cigarettes, you know? So it's a cultural shift among other things. Yeah. I don't think there's anything else. I think that's all we needed to know. So thank you so much for being here today.
And I'm happy, I think, some of this might have already been kind of sent, but I'm happy either through Fred or through Aaron, you know, if it'd be helpful to get that list of bellwether districts, get a list of other just Washington districts that have filed. And I think
Yes.
copies of the complaints, you know, just make sure you guys have some of that publicly available
That'd be
information,
great.
especially kind of what the case is about, what we're alleging. I can make sure you guys have all of that to review as well.
So we'll get that information, and then, if you're planning to put it on an agenda, we'll put it on the agenda topics. Or I can even send some things out in a weekly board report, even more time limit, so.
Great.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you guys.
Thank you. We have 5 minutes or so before everyone else is due here, so
Perfect.
we can have another quick break.
Orange slice.
And the orange is very good.
The orange is-
First goes.
Just to get a gauge. Yeah, I'm not quite sure who's good. That might have to turn.
I know, that's somewhere, because eventually.
Yes.
Because I heard that they were good.
Kind of process what you have to call it in the chat about next time. That took me a little while. I was like, oh, because it's professional. I was like, but that is, where's he?
Good.
Yeah, where you go?
All right. The final stretch of today's study session, turning towards the SAT. And I'm just going to kind of set the stage a little bit to bring our team up to speed kind of on, where we were this morning. I thought that one of his examples was a great example of I think how this has unfolded. And that is, I don't think Deborah and Jody are the first board members to ask, though, at least since I've been superintendent, inquiries along the way of, hey, how come we don't offer the SAT, or what is our process for offering the SAT? And we've provided, responses, and they've been satisfied. And Director Glowick and Dan, you brought up, hey, why aren't we asking, or why aren't we offering the SAT? And his example this morning was, and so if a board member then has it and they're not satisfied, then they have a chance to bring it to the board and say, can we have the conversation? And I think it's an example of how that unfolds. I don't think in all my years talking to Nick about the SAT that he's ever been against the SAT. What he's always mindful of is protecting all of the interests of the school. And so I don't think anyone comes here to today's conversation against the SAT or for the SAT. We're for kids. And so today's conversation is really around, it's not about being contentious. It's about being, I'm going to steal from our presenter this morning, connected. And how do we learn more? And so we didn't bring a presentation to you. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions. For us to take input, and then where we go from here is a bigger conversation. But we know that you wanted to learn more and know more, and for us to be able to kind of share history. Jamie has the longest history as far as perhaps what it's like over time. I think Nova, you at one point oversaw the SAT administration at the high school.
Weston, yeah.
And Weston. So we have lots of different experience. And then Nick, you bring.
I proctored one year actually, SAT, believe it or not, Fred.
Yeah.
So
There we go.
Yeah, I did that with full scope. Full scope.
And I've taken this.
Yeah. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Maggie Ty, just to, I don't know, kick things off or how you want to take it from here. But
Yeah, I guess, to start with, I don't think any of us has a really clear idea of what would be involved if we wanted to bring the SATs to our kids here. I think a lot of us who have older kids went through like the bad years where during COVID, it was almost impossible to get, a test seat, right? Not just for the SATs, but for the ACTs, it was just like, driving like across state lines kind of thing, So if you set that aside completely, like realizing that we're not in that state quite anymore, just for convenience, so that, your kid can ride their bike and take the SAT and not have to be driven to, or wherever, like, what would be involved? What is involved? I guess that's so that's kind of what we're hoping for today, is just to kind of hear like what's involved. Why haven't we historically done it? Have we ever done it?
and then I think our essential question takeaway from us would be, what are the board's interests? It may not be in the SAT in particular. You may have a bigger interest on that, because we might have different ways to solve different interests as we move forward that may or may not be what we picture. And so, I don't think we need to have solutions in mind, but need to know that. So
Can I add a question? Kind of first and foremost, is there a current barrier to our students being able to access the things that they need to apply to college?
So I'll add that
Yes,
one
add
to
that.
and I'll just kind of keep track and make sure we answer questions throughout.
Yeah,
Oh, and
yeah.
if you see this, we're trying something new where this
Sorry,
is
I-
board members wanting to talk. So it's like raising a hand. So if you see that coming up, that's someone's in the queue.
So,
Dan, I did it first. Oh, sorry, Jody's in the queue.
So I just wanted to, what I had asked, I think I asked this question, like back to school night or whatever we're calling it, curriculum night. And just as like parent Jody, like, hey, why can't we get to the SATs? And this was, Oliver took his first round of SATs in Friday Harbor, second one in Seattle. I mean, it was like easy peasy because it's like, the schedule's like one. And I got a really good, like 3-minute in-person explanation of like why that we didn't offer it. And I was like really satisfied. That's cool. And in the meantime, I think I'd also asked Fred. So Fred was like, Nick, tell Jody. And then and Nick told Jody. And I was totally like, satisfied with your, it was like 2 short and sweet explanations of like why it didn't happen in the past. And I think it'd be useful just to like sort of for our parent population or our community in general to just sort of have that like short answer explanation. Cause I was completely like, after I got that explanation both times, I was just like, yeah, makes sense for Jody.
my interest is the comparative one to other districts now, not just to historical. I believe that Bellevue, Lake Washington, and North Shore all offer in-school SATs. My niece goes to Newport High School. She took 2 of them. And then she took one over the summer where I think it was in August, which is a more high in demand date, had to take it in Spokane. Her highest score happened to be the one she took in school where she slept in her bed the night before, took it in a classroom in an environment that she was familiar with and scored the highest. So I'm also interested in what the experience has been for those districts that have offered it in school, what the uptake rate is, if they have any data of in which environments students score the best, if it's in the, when they have the home court advantage, so to speak, at their schools, or if they take it at some other testing facility, and then what they've heard from their parents and community members. Do they like it? Do community members at Newport High School perhaps find it disruptive and unnecessary? And is there any pushback that they're hearing that actually, it's no longer needed in their school district and therefore they're no longer offering?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are you talking about during school day testing or are you talking about weekends?
So I believe they do both, and it's one of the questions. And one of the things, some of the information I've tried to gather, my understanding is that the Bellevue School District both offers it in school for juniors and seniors, one test date. And then I think they also do have Saturdays for those students that can't make it. I think that's my understanding. Again, I tried to gather information, but I haven't been able to get that information yet. Is, for Saturday, I think those are just for their students. I don't think it's open to any community, anyone in the area, or families won't be driving far. During a conversation, during a Christmas party, I know at least in December, people were still going to Friday Harbor for the December test dates. So, I know that February and March and the ones that are right around the corner, it's sort of like going to the beach in the winter, not particularly crowded. But yeah, my interest is what are other districts doing, hearing that are doing it? And then, why do we have a different position?
My probably expectation or vision of this is to learn of one of the components and just one of the paths students and family have to go through to prepare the life after high school, right? So if it's college or not, and it's basically one of those components. And I say that this is like seeing the experiences and the barriers that students and family have. Since I am also going through this process myself, some of the experience and that other families share with me are still very unknown, and the same as going to sign up for SATs and going far away or close. So I think it's more of an understanding, kind of an overall system, and how can we make it better to make sure that those experiences that people share with me in terms of what I can do to support the families, and maybe hiring or not somebody external or not necessarily needs to happen. So it is one of the components of life after high school that I need to understand. That is pretty much what it is.
Just to clarify on that, is it fair to say that you're asking, how do we support students and families through the process? The process is the whole process, but
Yeah,
specific to today
it
is the
So
SAT
today is
testing.
one of the components, and
Okay.
this is what it is, and I understand, but I also understand that, for example, one of the components is the academic advisor. So how much, like, how does this, even to sign up for the SAT and all of those components, I think it needs to happen together. It's not the SAT, we put the SAT. I think that at the same time, there will be another thing. I think it is a system by itself that needs to I don't know, just see if there's something that we can do better. And if we do, then we do better. And if it's working, it's working. But I think it's one of the components. That's what I think.
Got it.
It's one of it.
Thank you.
Jumping in anywhere?
Yeah.
I'll just start with a clarification around the Saturday testing has to be open to the public. So that is not something we can do where we can host something and have it only be for our students. Which I'll kind of pull back into, and Weston can speak more of. When we last did this, one of the things we were looking at was how many kids were our students that attended that testing. And we estimate that it's about less than 10% of the kids that came to our school were actually Mercer Island High School students.
On a Saturday.
On a Saturday,
Okay.
yeah. And so that was one of several reasons that we opted to stop doing it. Amongst other reasons was the amount of time and coordination that it takes is absolutely insane. And Weston can probably speak more to that because he was the last to do it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Nick has this kind of.
Oh, sorry, please.
Trying to follow the
Apologies.
protocols.
Have something.
And Fred, so in this roundtable kind of discussion and so forth, I can ask questions to.
Yeah, and there won't be any decisions made. This is
Of course.
for
Yeah.
all of us to learn together.
Yeah, and just so I'm learning, so the interest that I can understand from the board and so forth too. I know that I answered some individual questions with Jody, and it sounded like, Dan, you had some individual questions around the region and so forth. And Christina, it sounded like you had community members that were asking you questions as well. So I'm just curious what the volume of interest that you guys are hearing and or seeing. Is this individual board members that are concerned, or is it community members that are reaching out to you in this piece? I just am curious, and let me clarify my question as well, because our community, I have not got these questions directly to me around the SATs not being offered as something that we're missing at the high school. And our community has been lovingly communicative in my experience in 8 years here, and asked me many questions. And then you start to feel like a groundswell, like our approach to cell phones, that we started to find that there was a very growing interest, and I started to get more and more questions, and I saw the volume rise for me, and that kind of had my conversations with Fred start to grow in that same exact way. And so I guess I'm just asking the team members here just what they're hearing on the streets. If these are individual concerns, or if these are actually a groundswell that you are seeing, because at my level, I'm not seeing it. I'm not getting any questions, and I normally get those questions, I guess is what I'm saying.
Can we just go around the table?
It's good.
Thank you for following.
Yeah, I like it though. I think it's fun. It's good.
I'm gonna use next.
So my personal experience is from a couple of years ago. And I've also been asking now. So when I first came on the board, and before my personal experience as a parent, was when it was kind of starting to tighten up. And I went to then Donna at the time. I was like, why can't we do this? Right. And got the the time and the money and it doesn't serve our students and all that. And I was like, okay, makes sense. I also wasn't personally invested, so I didn't know. When I assisted my child in signing up, we got to go to Arlington High School. And that was just post-COVID. Yes, just post-COVID. And it was a hassle. There's no question. It was a hassle. It's always been a hassle. When I was a student, I was accused of taking the SAT here. I did not take the SAT here. Even if it was offered in the late 80s, I certainly wasn't able to get it here because I remember going to Eastside Catholic when it was in the Renton area. And I went somewhere else too, maybe Rainier Beach, but not Mercer Island. And it was I think it actually was offered here and I couldn't get it because that's the way College Board, a for-profit organization, sets it up. So I have heard the only quibbling I ever hear, any discussion in the community is for the parents that are going through it in that moment. It's a hassle. I would, like I said, I asked my questions because it was a bit of a hassle. We experienced a bit of a hassle. We also didn't sign up very timely. So that, take full responsibility for that. Also had friends who signed up like the week ahead or week before the deadline and were able to get Bellevue. So there is zero correlation it's all luck of the draw. And so, because people cancel and move things, I think it's also this pressure we put on kids. Why on earth are they taking SATs 3, 4 times? But just for their own mental health. That's if they want to, they want to, but their own mental health, I don't get it. What I do hear more of is the question of college search application process readiness and support of this. I did not choose to hire a private college counselor for $10,000 or more, maybe. Other people do. That's totally whatever their needs are is great. But I also have heard less and less and less of it as we've got the College and Career Center with Chris and then also I know the PTA just put on a program. So I think that that's building and I'm seeing those needs addressed there. So, and also with the college counselors, with their checklist that they did a year or two ago, 3 ago, where it was what grades, what things they should be doing, what students should be doing in every grade, and really pushing parents read the counseling newsletters because all of the information you need to know is in them, and you're not going to get that information unless you read the newsletter. So that's the feedback I have.
Sorry, before you start, Jody, can we just go around pretty quickly to answer the question, only because it's already 1:20. I personally have a hard stop at 2, and we're really here to hear from the staff, though you guys are still welcome to ask questions.
I'm here more of a sort of rumbling, but I do hear from community members who are like, Jody, can you fix this? Yes, of course I can. But I would say, and what I say to them is what I learned when I asked the school, which was that we can't guarantee Mercer Island spots on a Saturday test day for Mercer Island kids. So even if we added a test day, odds are you wouldn't get it. And most people are like, yeah, okay. And I have noticed, just as someone who's, I had a kid going through SATs in COVID, and that was difficult. And I have been taking SATs now, or newly done with this SATs. And I got, 5 emails with added test dates yesterday. Of we've added dates in Bellevue and Seattle, whatever. So, the College Board keeps emailing you being like, we've added test dates, take it again. So, I think that there are a lot more testing available. I think the most vocal members of our community about the SAT testing are probably the people who were inspired by trying to get the kids SAT testing in the COVID and immediately post-COVID years. And I'm hearing that because that's the cohort I hear from. That people are like, it was so hard for me. Why can't we fix this? And I'm like, our solution. A quick Google search just now said that CSEP Bellevue is offering it as a school day SAT. I don't know, that's a whole other can of logistical worms, but for their Bellevue students, but it's true that on Saturday's SAT day, you cannot guarantee spots for specific people.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is, I guess, very different from you, Nick. I hear that it's a common and acute problem for parents that adds a lot of stress and anxiety to an already stressful and anxiety-producing process. And specifically understanding the answer for, the reasons for Saturday, but then looking to what our neighbors next door are doing, Newport High School, Lake Washington School District, and wondering why we're not doing the same. I've only heard positive experiences from those school districts that offered the in-school SATs, and would like to learn more of how many students are taking it in those districts that offer it, where they're doing the best, if it's in their school setting, or if it's when they take it outside at one of these private test centers. So yeah, like I hear Dan, like, this is a problem. Why aren't we doing what other districts, which are some of the top ranked and are now the top ranked districts in the state, doing?
Christina?
Yes, to answer your question, I guess that mostly, I think that what I have heard is when I wanted to start with the search of what do I have to do, and everybody's sharing that they had the same experience. So not necessarily, it was more, we went through the same. And I also will say that as somebody that was not raised in the American system, I had a lot more questions. And I was very grateful by the PTA I think maybe 2 weeks ago, that for night for college for international parents and those who are, and it was fantastic. Like, I think that should happen from 8th grade up more often, because there were so many questions that all of us we were they make a lot of sense. So some of the answers I got, even when I have asked everybody almost here all of my questions, and there were so many that I didn't know. So I think that it is based on who is in the community and who is newer to the community. And we have a large international community that is growing. So probably those are what I have heard from. So hopefully.
I'm not hearing anything, but that's because I have a 9-year age gap between my kid and cohorts, so like, Zoom hasn't tested it. Just so you know. So I heard nothing. Deborah, is your thing still up for a reason? No. So
I was just
let's
thinking, we
get
have
back to
Weston,
Deborah.
yes.
Yeah, it sounds like I was the last person to coordinate when we did do a district site test. And so just speaking to that, the process, it's pretty extensive
When was that?
2016. And we actually did a late administration. We were a June administration in that year. And so I was just looking at my calendar to see, I was training teachers at the middle school and high school who had signed up to be proctors, because you have to have volunteer proctors. Then volunteers, not the right word, they get paid through the College Board.
No, we can't volunteer.
Yeah, but we asked for volunteers to do that. I was training them at the end of May for a June test. I think that may be one of the reasons why many of our students didn't test at our site, is they have already tested by that June date. So that would be my assumption. It's a pretty big lift to coordinate. It's facility maintenance. There is a cost, for the facilities, for food and water for proctors.
And now tech.
Yes. Yeah, and the tech need paper and pencil at the time that I was coordinating it. And then Dan, to your question about school site, actually, when I was at Shorecrest High School as an associate principal, I coordinated there. They transitioned to a school-based one. We did it during the school day for all juniors, and there was an equity piece behind that the cost was borne by the district to provide all juniors the test. And I left before, because that was the year I came back to Mercer Island, so I didn't see the scores. I don't know if that's something I would be able to follow up on.
One thing I would just add in on what I have heard, adding to kind of that Saturday challenge, is a barrier for districts is what College Board pays for the proctors is now less than what teachers make per hour hourly. And so the ability to get proctors and the technical knowledge that proctors now need because of the technology have made the Saturday administrations more challenging. That's not the case. I'm not hearing during the school day ones, but that is something that I've heard in terms of the college boards on that.
Before we get into more questions, I would love to hear answers to the original set of questions that I asked about like what's involved in the costs and stuff like that. And I also want to know, I don't know anything about the technology, like what do we have to
We don't
provide?
either, we didn't do it, but,
Right.
kids have to bring their own devices now.
Okay.
But I do know that, there are challenges within that as well.
Yeah.
There are challenges within that as well in terms of, the tech piece around making sure that they can get through our firewall with their devices is an added layer of challenge with tech testing.
Got it.
So it requires significant tech support to ensure that they're able to do that.
Okay, Erin.
Yeah, I don't want to take away. I just wanted to add, I did actually, in light of the conversations that were going on with the board, I did raise this sort of the question just to my HR executive group, just sort of how they administer it. And they said some of the districts do offer testing on the weekends, Saturday testing. They have acknowledged that it's a challenge to get their own staff to work it. And that's distinct from what happens because some of them also offered in the day. And so that was a differential in terms of staffing. So I just wanted, that's an HR piece, is actually getting people to do it on a weekend day. So for whatever that's.
And if we, sorry, I'm going to call you next. If we offer it on a weekday, are we losing an instructional day and then adding a day to the end of the school year, or how does that work?
No, it's typically counted as an instructional
Because it's
day.
education
It's similar to the way we do PSAT, where there's a disruption to the normal calendar. Nick, I'm gonna kick it to you because now, this is.
Oh, he's too deep. He's too deep. He can't answer.
I mean, no, yeah, that's exactly what it is, Fred. Yeah. So just like how we do PSAT or Healthy Youth Survey or any of these other longer assessments in that way. So yeah, it just pushes your instructional model. And for staff members that are time bound towards AP tests in May, which are also a value in our school district, it continues to push that cart kind of down the road. So yeah.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to, piggybacking off of what Nick and Aaron said, that there's a distinction between the Saturday, both in terms of the administration costs, some of the logistical challenges, and the in-school, which is akin to the PSAT. My focus is on the in-school, which is what North Shore, Lake Washington, and Bellevue offer. And yeah, certainly there is a trade-off, right? That half of a day that would have otherwise been spent, in sort of normal classroom instruction, is for SAT. And that's, a question for the board and for the community, right? Of what that balance is. But yes, I certainly recognize distinction. And I think from my own brief research, at least the College Board suggested that training to be a proctor was maybe like 60 minutes per person, or at least it's up on the website, but it seemed pretty minimal when I looked at that.
Jody, Nick, logistically, space-wise, could we do PSAT and SAT on the same day and kernel all those little people in the same?
That's an interesting concept. I do want to respond to that comment that Dan.
I play my guitar.
That's interesting. I guess I hadn't been asked that, Jody, so I'll respond to that when my brain works on it. Dan, the aspect of 60 minutes of PD for it is really a fascinating one, because while that may seem like a small amount to other people, for us it is actually a significant amount. And the reason why is that these are our pre-described times of the year with our staff in that way. So to give up one of those times with our staff is pretty crucial in the work that we're doing with them. I think, Jody, you experienced some time recently in our PAC meeting around like our needs analysis report and some of the things that we're doing. We've been doing some work around MTSS and tier 1 strategies for helping our learners in that way to remove that, to then proctor a test from SAT and College Board, at least for our staff purposes. I think they would much rather spend their time impacting their students and their teaching operations throughout the day and utilize that 60 minutes. If it was 60 minutes, I don't know that piece. Maybe Weston knows the old school time of how much PD it takes, but if it's just one day of PD right now for our staff to come together and for the amount of proctors that we would need, that would take my once that month of PD away from that staff, and I would find that to be pretty valuable time, and I would have a hard time with that just as building maintenance for me. As far as administering for the entire school, 2 tests in the same day. I mean,
At the same time.
yeah, I don't know, because we use nearly our entire staff for PSAT now and our classified staff in that way. So, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I don't know how I don't think we have enough volume of staff to be able to do that, or enough rooms and spaces in that way. I mean, I guess we would have to utilize gyms and like our Performing Arts Center, and so forth. But I'd have to also look at the testing requirements from how those environments are set up, because their College Board is very specific about what's on the walls and what is posted and projected and things like that too. So to preserve those spaces, I guess. So my question is, I'm not sure.
Sorry, Fred, and then Christina, and then Dan.
And this is just more of a process piece of just remembering that whatever we say isn't locking us. Like, it's okay to say, I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
And for board members to have wild ideas and not be held accountable to wild ideas either. This is truly a study session. So, and those are things that we can also just process.
Thank you for answering that, because I was going to piggyback on the idea of having it together. Just thinking about the other students, and that doesn't mean that you have, it's the brainstorming process. Those students that decide that ACT is better than the SAT. ACT.
Come on, Christina, get with the lingo.
I would say that if I proceed politically, it almost sounds the same.
Yeah.
So, the ACT, there's some that prefer that instead of the ACT, and there's others that either do not choose it just because they don't want to take it, or those who will not go forward on the core college path. And that also means that there's 1 day less off school. And what does that mean? I'm just thinking on all the things that need to be on the table to make sure that we see every single student.
Christine, I appreciate you asking that question for sure. And as you're saying it, I'm thinking, that is kind of a community, but almost value in our, like, once we start this ball, it starts to roll on us. And so it's not PSAT, it's PSAT, SAT, ACT. In that way, because you're right. I hear that part is the factions of community members that believe ACT fits better for my learning style, and I'm going to perform better in the ACT than I am the SAT. So you can see that domino start to roll, having another testing day as well.
And
It's interesting.
I do want to acknowledge those students that just knowing that they have to take one of these tests, the stress level goes to the ceiling and they go down in grades and everything because of the pressure of the community to the next. So I'm just thinking, putting it on the table. We are looking for all students, that this is an opportunity for all of students, and we also take care of those who might not, and just have them there in mind. So that's
Yes, I mean, I guess, to Jody's suggestion, my understanding is that that is what the Bellevue School District does. When the PSAT is offered to juniors in the fall, that's also when it's the seniors for taking the SATs in the fall. So that also, it doesn't disrupt actually a half day that's already been allotted to testing. And then there is the additional half day for those, I guess, seniors who take it in the spring, or no, juniors who take it in the spring. But one of the reasons I was hoping to get more information, because districts I know have been offering it in school now for a number of years, and just adjacent to us. I mean, a couple miles away at Newport High School. And I think have probably encountered some of these questions and then certainly come up with their own solutions. And now the question that I would like to be able to answer to the community is, it seems to be working well for those school districts, and their community members are happy. And so why aren't we adopting it? And just, is there intentionality behind it? Or is it just because this is the way things have always been done?
And does it have to do with them being much larger districts and maybe having staff they could borrow from like another high school, right?
Do they
Like,
offer it at each high school or just one where they all converge?
Right. Okay, I've got Jody and I've got Deborah, but again, just keeping an eye on the clock. We're not really giving the staff that much time to actually answer.
Can I
that
respond to
questions.
that part that Dan just said? So Dan, I hadn't heard that they did that simultaneously. And so I actually, I'm gonna ping a few people just see if I can get anything in lifetime while we're here. So I'm actually pinging a few friends and neighbors and so forth, to see that how that actually is built out in the way. Because as I'm processing, so I used to do this, and I think Jamie may have as well, or Wesley, when I was testing coordinator when I first became an AP here 8 years ago. I did testing here, and just the coordination of PSAT alone was a massive undertaking for me, and then a team of people to do that. And so for them to do that in conjunction with the SAT, I'm not quite sure how, knowing the infrastructure of our high school and the amount of rooms that we have to access to, but I don't know. And so, and if that's what you say Newport is doing,
That's what I believe,
Yeah.
like, I
Eric.
don't quote me. That's-
Yeah, I just want to add, I can double check as well, just on the staffing side for the in-school piece. But I will say even offering the PSAT here can be challenging on staffing. Like I've personally been brought in and trained to support that because we didn't have enough humans to do it because of extended time, that kind of thing. Like we need more humans to help. So certainly willing to reach out from the HR perspective, but I do want to acknowledge the pressures of finding people to staff. And so that having 2 in a day might be challenging.
I know I'm the one that just said we need to listen to the staff more, but just an idea that just popped into my head. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, you sorry.
I was,
Thanks, sir.
I was.
An idea that just popped into my head. Just thinking outside the box a little bit. Like if we had a lot of kids signed up for SAT or ACT administration somewhere else, could we organize a bus or something to just make it easier for families to like get them there? Like I'm not talking Friday Harbor, but I'm talking like no.
There's kids with extra time, there's like a handful of kids.
And you register on
Right.
your own, so you'd have to like.
Or they could just host and find carpools themselves, which is what they did.
Yeah. Okay, Jody.
Where would you like to go first?
I would.
Okay.
So, because she's taking things that
I'm
said
taking all
to
her
her.
ideas and.
So one is, I'm still questioning whether or not, I totally understand the issue of taking it on your home court, sleeping in your own bed. That's huge. As of right now, there's no reason why kids can't, there's no reason why kids can't sleep in their own beds because there's downtown Seattle spots available, and I guess even more. And I would argue that, I think the 2 big times, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the 2 big times are early fall for the seniors, and May, June are both big ones, especially May for the juniors to take it before the summer. So I would argue that like December is not a big one, February maybe EVICT or March isn't a big one, but like the early fall for seniors, last chance, and then the spring for juniors is what I kind of see. And again, those are just, I would love to see some sort of collective understanding, survey, word of mouth, whatever it is. I feel like a need in this college process, like consider if we had all the bandwidth in the world, let's do it all, right? But we don't. Cost or time or staff. Or volunteers, frankly. PTA is starting to talk about not offering them mock SATs because they can't get 2 volunteers to run the program. It's really sad. 2. Trust me, I was one who had to find people last year. I would love to do some sort of, or get some sort of information, concrete with current 8th through 11th graders of what are your needs around the college process? Is it SAT classes, prep classes? Is it college application process? Is it trying to build a college list of appropriate schools? You know, this is one issue, but it's such a tiny part of the whole process that if we're going to take on something, I don't know that this is the right thing to take on, especially in considering the needs. I don't have a dog in the fight. I just want to make sure that our school is providing the best opportunities for all of our kids overall with our limited resources. I am pro SAT if a kid wants to take SAT. I'm not against SATs. I'm not against higher learning. But the fact of the matter is very few kids need to take SATs anymore, that it's mandatory. It's not mandatory except for a handful of schools. It does provide scholarship opportunities. There's good things about it. I'm not saying, but Is that need still as high as it was when SATs were mandatory for all schools? We also have the college guaranteed admission program where they don't have to take the SATs to get into school in Washington State, other than actually, it's not. Anyways, my point is what is the current need? What is the current availability? And we need to know that before. We're already spending so much time on this from a board perspective. Learning is important. One question I have that could be an easy fix for the SAT problem is, could we reach out to Bellevue and partner with them on their school day SAT testing? I don't know, the cost is significant. No one's really talked about it. I was looking up some costs yesterday, and according to ChatGPT, I'll tell you my source, Montgomery County School District in Maryland, which is actually similar to our level of education, has 11,000 high school students, and it costs them $450,000 a year for the in-school SAT. If we do in-school SAT, is the school district obligated to pay, or is it only if kids sign up? And obviously we have scholarships, take that part out of it. But we're in a budget crisis. I know you don't agree. We're in a budget crisis where we're struggling whether or not we can keep the staffing we have. Do we really want to take this cost on? It would be like saying we're going to take over paying for college applications when our kids apply to 27 schools instead of 6. It's just all about choices, not placing importance on one or the other. Are there solutions that doesn't burden our financial bottom line, our staff bottom line, which is often one and the same? And it's taking on something else. We can't get volunteers to do anything. Northwood canceled their bingo night because they couldn't get volunteers. Bingo night. And yet now we're talking SAT. It's all really important, but can we maybe reach out to Bellevue and say, or have we reached out to Bellevue and say, can we partner where our students can sign up and pay to take the SAT on the school day and it's an excused absence?
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, what I'm hearing here, and I think probably other staff are, is that there's a desire for a little bit more information from our neighboring districts on the in-school option. I had focused on the Saturday because I misunderstood sort of the direction the board was going. So with respect to staffing, I think we can explore costs. I just want to also be sensitive, which is sort of in line with what I think the board is generally acknowledging, is that this would be, no matter which direction you go, it's going to be a burden on the system. And in a smaller system, what is the impact? I think you mentioned, is it an economies of scale, given Bellevue, Lake Washington are much bigger? And sort of how do you weigh that burden against all the stuff that's already being done? And did something else have to fall off the plate in order to do the SAT? And that's a judgment call. But that is sort of where we are at in terms of, I think, just resources. So that's just something, as I said.
I do have the sense that nobody on the board is really interested in learning more about the option of a Saturday SAT, just given all the variables. So I think going forward, it's the in-school that we're more interested now that we know a little bit more about what Saturday would be involving.
You want to let the staff go, and then I'll go next.
Sure, let's just go down the line.
I can do.
I want to just add in a personal experience around the question of the PSAT and SAT in the same, and some considerations that I ran into. I just had to look up the new times, and so for a standard administration, it's 2 hours and 15 minutes plus breaks, and that exceeds the block schedule even long periods at the high school. So to run a traditional day for students not taking that test, you then need substitutes to cover the classes. If, for example, a teacher teaches juniors and seniors back to back, I would need a substitute to cover their next class as their proctoring. That's just one consideration I had to work through. And then also considering the extended time rules. So at 50% and then 100% extended time, those are separate settings that require additional staff proctors and take students into the 3.5 to 4.5 hour time window, which also might mean more subs. So it's considerations that I experienced in organizing a school day one. I wanted to share.
A couple things. One, I think something to keep in mind, and I appreciated your comments about this is one component of, potentially the college process, is figuring out, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve, right? If the problem is equity and access, there are vouchers that we can give to every student. So if the issue is cost, we have a way to address that. If the issue is access to locations in a nearby vicinity, and talking to Debbie Hansen, the assessment coordinator at the high school right now, she said the only people that she really hears from are people who didn't sign up in advance, who waited until, the last few weeks, and they're realizing like, oh, now I need to scramble and get my kiddo registered. And she said anybody who's planning ahead, she doesn't get the complaints and concerns because there are lots of seats available in different places. Yes, even when I took it here at the high school, I took it in 6th grade at the UW. I also took it.
6th grade, that's great.
Yep. I also took it. Right. But I also took it at Rainier Beach. I took it at Bellevue High School, and I took it at East Bay Catholic. So those were my 4 administrations I attended here. And there was no opportunity. So I do think that has been historically, nearby places you could get to as long as you registered early. So if it's an issue of equity to access and financial reasons, I think we have a solution. I also think being careful about finding a solution that fits some needs, right? There's 2,022 universities, colleges and universities that don't have tests as a requirement anymore. That might change. It might ebb and flow over time, like it has over time. It's gone that direction. But I also think keeping the big picture in mind, perhaps the issue isn't the test itself or the administration of the test. Maybe it's more along the lines of communicating and how do you find out which schools do or don't require testing, and depending on your interests and what you're wanting, which test might be more appropriate for you. I just want to make sure we don't narrow in on a specific thing because somewhere else is doing it, and not think about what might be the needs of our community and where might we leverage our resources, knowing that they're finite, to be able to meet the bigger picture for all kids, and not, start with something very small and have an impact here when really the issue is broader.
Thank you. Nova. Nick had his up first, so I'm gonna let him go first.
Yeah, and just doing some preliminary work with some of our team members and so forth, just to try to get some information. Thinking about the combo platter of PSAT, SAT, same day type of experience. Not only we would need more staff, but more rooms. At our current estimate is that we would need more staff and more rooms to be able to proctor it in the effective way, especially thinking about additional half-time, full-time, extended time and so forth. So we would need the additional space. So it would be probably access to peak. Obviously, Crest is already used, but Crest would be in the place. It'd probably be like the boardroom. There'd be other places that we would spill into the community a little bit more, access to maybe churches or other things like that. Based on what I'm seeing for at least our infrastructure, how many classrooms we actually have in the school as it is right now. And then the need for more proctors was another component of it, especially knowing that we would have 2 different tests going on at that same period of time. The other part that I want to mention is that, and I touched on it, but I want to make sure that I drive this home, and maybe Aaron, the cost part about this might be something I would ask from HR, which would be, I'm not in the interest of giving up fall professional development for this. I don't know how I want to say that really thoughtfully, softly, like I'm saying that as kind as I possibly can. But our fall days are in August and September with our staff are so critical. We just had 2.5 months off of time. We get them back. We negotiate this hard with our teams, and then to come back and then to have them, all of those resources. And I think of our humans as resources in this way, right? That our resources to then administer professional development. That's really about test administration, not growth and development for them. I would be giving up that time of the growth that we need to have. Hold on one second. And then, so I'd be giving up that time, and I don't want to give up that time. So then it'd be to pay them outside of that time is what I'm saying, is paying our staff of, probably we're about 150 staff members for additional that hour to get that training for that in that way. So that's that additional cost, because I wouldn't be giving up a faculty meeting or a DD time to be able to do that administration in that way. So that's what I'd be looking for, that type of support, I guess. Erin?
Yeah, I just want to dive in that realistically, just to be transparent, a lot of the PD time that it does occur before the start of the school year is part of the state funded PD days, which are limited and would not include learning on test administration, so that would not even be an option. So we would have to instead, because it's earmarked for specific things, like SEL, social emotional development, that kind of thing. And so it would likely be something we would have to do outside of that, because most of our PD is wrapped up in that state funded days. And then the other cost, and this is just something that as we try to get more information for the board, we'd want to ask is sort of, what are those costs? How do you actually manage the training with your staff? Because many districts are in the same boat we are with respect to restrictions on the PD. And the other piece is the cost associated with the test coordinator, because we would have to extend, or our test coordinators aren't set up to do this. There'd be additional costs associated with that just for the lead person. So I just think that's more information. I would be shooting in the dark right now. So anyway, just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, and Erin, I guess I'll just, a part of that ask then, if it wasn't in a state given day, then it would be a district given day. And our faculty meeting in the September period of time is actually utilized. That is in our contract, which is around TPEP and Danielson for those staff members to get that training. So then that would have to get renegotiated to move from another location, or we're paying for outside of that time if I'm going to give up that space and time in that way. So that's the way I see the logistical piece of our time in September. If it was to be a fall administered test, that time in December or is September would need to be shifted and paid for our 150 staff members, not to mention the many staff members we have to hire to put into that.
I'm gonna jump to Jody and then back to you, and then jump to Dan. I wasn't gone yet. I know. But I will put down now. Most respected Pent.
Well, the lucky thing is I have a three-part question and two of them were answered, so. One of them was about, the, PSAT effort, but it sounds like that's with the, if there's overlap with the PTSA, practice test, but it sounds like those are totally separate, so never mind that. And, the other thing I just want to say that I actually fully support, Nick in this whole PD time situation, because just from what I was sort of reflecting on, like with the conversation with Christina and the conversation that Nick had, it's like, I think that we have to be aware that our school, you know, it's like you are what does it they say? You are what you say, you are what you wear. I don't know, but you know, like we don't want to say that the SAT is the most important thing our staff is doing when students don't go on to college, students take the SAT, students, you know, whatever. And I think it's just sort of like from a equity issue for our educators and all the students that they educate. Like, we don't want to say we're going to focus all this energy on this subset of 11th graders when we have 4 grades of school, 4 grades of students to support with our PD time. I think that Nick is spot on and has completely clarified my thinking on this, that this is time for our entire school's worth of education of students and not for a subset of 1 grade that wants to take the SAT in school.
Okay. No, go really quick.
Okay. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the capacity in terms of outside of just professional learning time. We aren't like those big districts. So in big districts, they have an assessment director whose job is only assessment. I know the North Shore one. So that is their only job, is assessment and data. In Mercer Island School District, that's Nova, and now Weston as support to that. Amongst all of the other things that we are tasked with. So capacity wise, that is something to consider. Outside of that, the thing we do have, but it costs us money, is classified personnel in our school buildings who help as assessment coordinators. If we were to ask Debbie to do additional testing, that would cost us more money. Because she already gets some from the high school to do PSATs, and some from the district to coordinate Smarter Balanced and WPS assessments. So I think that would have to be a factor we would consider just cost-wise, because that cost wouldn't probably be possible to be incurred by the district. So it would end up being on families, which is not ideal either. So I just want to throw that into the mix so that we know that there's definitely a capacity issue in terms of who can do this.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess a few thoughts is one, I guess I was surprised about sort of the room concern. I think it'd be the reason that'd be good to have discussions with those districts that are providing the SAT in school. My understanding is our utilization rate at the high school is on the lower side for most like adjacent high schools, because enrollment has been declining, demographic change. So I would think if any school has just the rooms and the facilities to offer it, we would be in a good position to offer it. Maybe Newport High School and others are using outside facilities. I'm not aware. And then two, like on the cost side, I mean, there's a couple dimensions. One is, people have mentioned in various ways, the internal HR cost, which is the reason I'd be curious to know what those costs are for the districts that have done it. The other is the fee component. And my understanding is there's a range. There's certain districts that have used some of their money, federal grant money, like Seattle School District or Seattle Public Schools, I believe, to offer the SAT in school for free. In certain school districts, we do offer it, but I don't think it's, it's paid. If the student decides to take it, they pay, I think, probably similar to the PSAT and how we currently pass on those fees. But when to distinguish between the fee component, where my understanding is there's a range, and then there's the HR component, and that's a question of, well, what are other districts experiencing?
We have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to recognize Fred.
You can go, I kind of have some summary type
Okay,
comments,
then-
so.
Then Deborah, then
Yeah,
me,
I'll be quick.
Christina.
What I'm really hearing from this conversation is obviously logistically with the SATs. My interest, and I hope the boards as a whole, but my interest is making sure that we're meeting the needs of our students during this college applications process. And I think Jamie and Fred both said, what is the interest? That's my interest. If SATs is part of it, is there an easy fix? Is there not an easy fix? We know it's not an easy fix, or we would have been doing it, but are there more options now than there had been in the past? And it's worth an email or two to Bellevue to say, can we partner or not? Or, because that's an easy answer, right? Would love to hear more in the future. This is not direction. This is my interest. Like I said, the college application process, we've made great strides in the last couple of years with Chris Kenyon's job and with what the school counselors did with their checklist and with anyways, we've made great strides, and I would love to see and with what the PTA just did, I would love to see that be memorialized into some sort of program that kids and parents get to do, so that we're meeting the needs of all students and couch it as a post-college paths. And that's my interest, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all students, whether they're going to college or a different route.
You mean post-high school?
Did I say post-college?
Yes.
Post-high school.
Yes, I'm interested in that too. I wanted to say though, that the mention of the ACT kind of made me really start to think, because I think for kids now who are applying to like the schools that either still do have a test requirement or have brought one back, or for schools where,
There's like 3.
yeah, or schools where it's an advantage, where it's like extremely competitive. Like one of my kids was applying to computer science programs, and yeah, they didn't require testing, but if you had strong test scores, it was definitely to your benefit to submit. Most of those kids now do take the ACT and the SAT at least once to see which they did better on, and then they pick one and they kind of focus on maybe getting their scores up. So to me, to like make a big sacrifice of kind of like time and resources and like teacher and admin energy to just provide the SAT and not to also do the ACT as an in-school administration thing feels like a little bit like we're solving half of a problem, but like at what cost? I'm much more interested in the possibility of partnering together with maybe another district, like with Bellevue, on a school day to see if we can piggyback, since they do have so much space and, personnel and so forth. If there's some way that we could do that, our kids could, sleep in their own beds, not have to go too far, take the test on a school day. And if we could do that for the ACT as well as the SAT, I think that would actually really be serving a certain category of our students. Yeah.
That spiral that you said.
What?
SAT, then the ACT.
Then the ACT, yeah.
Then the
I'm
PSAT.
Just saying, like, if you're, otherwise we'll solve the problem, right?
Marty, do you want me to go first? Or do you want
I just want to be mindful that this past year, we had an uptick in AP testing by not a couple, by I think it was 400 new additional tests, and that workload does not happen just in May. It is built over the span of our year. So if this was an add-on, that is a unique challenge that I want to make sure that this is a growing trend. And I'm not saying it's a bad trend, but I'm saying it is a growing trend that was very significant at the high school. And so our staff members already feel that pinch and pressure to administer and make sure our students are prepared for those things. So I just want to be, I haven't said it yet, and I think it's a critical point to say this. I've already connected with some of our folks here, and that we can definitely, we've got great relationships with those school districts to find out more. I appreciate you acknowledging the work that we have done to help clean up some of these systems and processes to help our students know what they want and how we can do it. But we can definitely ask more questions from our partners across all places. So
Yeah, I appreciate it. Christina.
I was just going to say that when you ask those questions, I think that one uncertainty that needs to be very clear is the real cost, not only human resources, but I think that it's who finances and how much will cost, because I think that also knowing if we can afford it and if we decide to go for it, where we're going to take the money from. I think that that is something that maybe even if we want to, maybe if we cannot, or maybe yes. So without those numbers, we don't know.
And can I just say that if we're looking at outside school districts to see what other districts are doing, and then I would love to see like similarly sized school districts. Like what are other like single high school districts in Washington doing, not just like Bellevue and Lake Washington?
So I have big picture interests that have to do with the post high school experience, college, career, whatever that might be. And then pertinent to this, what are the impacts we have from staff to the other tests that we're offering? And I'll list all this out. What can we learn from other districts who do it? How do we support our students and families through the process? And what can we learn from our students themselves about what they're running into? Because the interests I know are, we're not trying to put barriers up for kids. You know, we're about removing barriers. We've said that as part of our 4 Bs, and then meeting their student needs. So I will put together some thoughts on this and put it in the weekly update for you to kind of discuss or whatnot. We can discuss it further, but there's plenty that we can learn as a system and learn as a team to meet our students' needs in the best way possible within our parameters.
Fred, can you share that since I'm not on the weekly updates?
I will.
Can I?
Absolutely. I'll share with my team.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Are we ready to adjourn? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Gotta go. Sorry, everyone.